Is there a test to show deficiency of vitamin B3? Yeah, absolutely. There's several, but some of them are pretty complex. The best one, honestly, the best one that we want to just ask for it, and hopefully your doctor can figure it out. If your doctor's not trained in nutrition, I recommend you follow up with someone who is. But you've heard me mention this term, if you've watched my show for any length of time. Lymphocyte proliferation is a great way to measure internal cellular storage of niacin. This is the most accurate way to really look at your niacin levels. So this is what I would recommend if you're getting with your doctor to run a test. Ask your doctor to run a lymphocyte proliferation test to look at niacin. Let's see, what else do we got here? Go back up just a hair. No, keep going. Is anyone? Oh, somebody asking about Polyface Farm. So yeah, if you want to come and visit me and hang out in Virginia, I'm actually going to be in Virginia here in a number of weeks at a place called Polyface Farm. We're going to be doing a long lecture there at Polyface with Dr. Thomas Cohen and some other really bright folks. So if you can make it, it's a great venue, and you could maybe come and meet me in person, say hi. So Spirit is asking, hi doc, I use your B Complete. I see you have a MTHFR blend. Should I take one or the other or both? I do have MTHFR gene. If you're using my B Complete, you don't necessarily need to add MTHFR to that, even if you have like a genetic MTHFR SNP or polymorphism. So point being, if you're using B Complete, if you're taking 2 to 3 of those a day, that should give you folate. It should give you all the B vitamins in combination. The reason I have a specific methylfolate blend is because some people that have autoimmune disease or gluten-related autoimmune disease are on medicines like methotrexate, where they're actually inhibiting or depleting their folate. So the drug itself causes the deficiency of folate. So we want to give them an extra amount. We want to give them more to compensate for what that medicine is doing. So that's one of the reasons. One of the other reasons why is during pregnancy, some women need more folate and have a history of delivering babies with birth defects or neural tube defects. So that's where more folate might be. Adding that on might be a good option. So Paul's asking, if you take 3 doses of 1,500 milligrams and you get a flush every time you take that dose, and you do that for a month, and then you reduce it to 500 milligrams per dosage and you get the same flush, does that mean you should stop supplementing the B3? No, it doesn't necessarily. Well, it doesn't mean that you should keep taking it, and it doesn't mean that you should stop taking it. I mean, a big part of it is why are you taking it? So, I mean, it depends on why you're taking it and how you determined that you needed, long-term mega doses of vitamin B3. I'm not a big fan of long-term mega dosing of any supplement without justification. So, Paul, it depends on how that you got to that justification for doing that. Let's see here, Mary, Doc, I take your vitamin C, your Detox C, every time I feel an onset of an allergy attack. The Detox C really helps to minimize the allergic reactions. I'm glad, thanks for sharing that, Mary. I'm glad that's helpful for you. Vitamin C is a mast cell stabilizer, so a lot of people that have allergy response, vitamin C works really, really well at reducing their symptoms. I'm not sure of your question, Marcus. Do we offer severe corn allergy? What's the best to talk to a doctor about? If you're asking about how to test for corn allergy, I mean, yeah, that can be tested for. There are a number of different tests, though, because allergy, there's 6 different ways your immune system can react to a food. And so there's IgE, there's IgG, IgA, IgM, immune complex, and T-cell response types of reactions that can all occur. So ask your doctor for all of those if you're trying to get that tested. So this is a great question. Are niacin, non-flush niacin, and time-release niacin the same in impact? How are they different? So if we're talking about non-flush niacin, in my experience, it is not as good. Clinically, it just doesn't work as well. Niacin is where it's at. Now, if you're talking about time-release niacin, it works just as good in my experience as regular niacin. It's not time-released. The big difference is the time-release somewhat delays or minimizes the flush. So the whole point of the time release is that slow trickle the niacin in so that you're not getting a heavy of enough dose at one point in time to have a big flushing response. As far as, so I tried niacin to lower triglycerides. It did not change. Is there a dose that is effective? Upwards of 500 milligrams, so 500 to 1,000 milligrams, and sometimes even higher. But if you're going to do that, you really should work with somebody to monitor your liver function. But I would say if it's not changing, if your triglycerides are not changing, it's probably because they're not massively high enough that niacin is going to be the right move. Most people have high triglycerides. So if you have high triglycerides, it's probably because, well, I don't know. I'm just making a huge assumption here about you, and I could be totally wrong because, I don't know what your diet's like, but high carbohydrate diets, triglycerides are fat, right? So triglycerides are fat. Carbs, people don't think that carbs and fats match. But what happens is when your carbohydrate's too high, your body will convert it into triglycerides. And so what happens is a lot of people are like 60, 70 plus % carbohydrates in their diet. And so they're hammering their liver to convert all that excessive carb into triglycerides. This is a big cause of it right here is carbohydrate. Not overeating fat, not eating too much animal meat, but just over-consuming pastas and breads and cereals and cakes and cookies and carbohydrate-laden food. Even the grain-free versions like the arrowroot and the tapioca and the cassava, these are all heavy carbohydrate that can do this too. So if what you might consider instead of just using niacin to try to reduce it, unless you have like a familial genetic hypertriglyceridemia, which is pretty rare, then you should look at your diet, and that may be part of what's happening too. So just a suggestion to look into. Let's see. How come other B vitamins are not labeled as B vitamins? In what regard? Not sure I understand your question. Some ingredients with alcohol have corn. Yes, that's true. A lot of your alcohols are derivative of corn and grains. Let's see. Alice is asking how much niacin to take. Alice, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. You can get a decent 50 milligrams of niacin is ample enough for most people in a day to make sure that there's not a deficiency that's going to develop. So I would tend to err on the lower side, not the higher side. So you don't necessarily need to go up to that 250, that 500 milligram dosing structure that a lot of people who are mega dosing it are doing. So again, if we're talking about just daily use and a good multivitamin, anywhere between really 20 and 100 milligrams would be in split dosing over the course of that multivitamin over several meals would be adequate. Does niacin flush affect the incidence of afib? What is the high limit for niacin for a poor methylator? So niacin, it's not about whether you're a poor methylator or not, and I've not seen niacin clinically increase anyone's afib, and so it doesn't, at least not in my experience. So haven't seen that be the culprit. Let's see here. Is there gluten in contact lenses? This is where I wouldn't say there's probably, I haven't seen any case where I've seen gluten as an active ingredient in contact lenses. I have seen cases where there were grain-based extracts in contact lens cleaners. So best kind of rule of thumb is to read the bottle on your cleaner and make sure that you're not getting that exposure. Do B vitamin deficiencies make you more sensitive to EMFs? No. B vitamin deficiencies, in my experience, do not make you necessarily more sensitive to EMFs. They may make you less protected, if that makes sense. So B vitamin deficiency doesn't make you react more because B vitamin deficiency is somehow linked to EMF. But remember, B vitamins help you protect your DNA, help protect your RNA, help protect your cells from being damaged. And so if EMF is a culprit that you're being exposed to regularly and repeatedly, it could potentially lower your B vitamin status, and so that therefore your symptoms would increase. But B vitamin deficiencies don't, you understand my gist. It's not that B vitamin deficiency causes the symptoms. The EMF is causing the symptoms. The B vitamin deficiency is just not allowing your body to protect yourself as well. Has niacin got any link to neuralgia, paresthetica, fatigue, and sleep disorders? Definitely fatigue. I think I answered that earlier. And definitely sleep dysfunction. Remember that that under certain circumstances that niacin, remember that to make niacin requires or can require tryptophan, but also to make serotonin requires tryptophan. So you have this competitive. Is that tryptophan going to be used in your body to make B6 or rather B3 niacin, or is it going to be used to make serotonin? And a big part of that is body need. So if you've got a body need shifting more toward niacin, you might have by default a reduction in your capacity to generate adequate serotonin. And this is one of the reasons why we think niacin deficiency can cause mood disorders and depression. It has to do with the favorability of using tryptophan. Instead of producing serotonin, we use tryptophan to produce vitamin B3. Let's see here. What's the difference between niacin, nicotinic acid, niacinamide, nicotinamide? I think I answered that question earlier. Let's keep going down. As far as explaining neuropathy, Elizabeth, that's in detail for a whole show. We've got a show queued up for neuropathy actually in the next month or so. So make sure you register to get that reminder. We'll be talking in depth about neuropathy. So if you're suffering from diarrhea, can that possibly indicate a B3 shortage? It could, but are there other possibilities? Remember, there's a lot of things that can cause diarrhea. And so parasite can cause diarrhea. Abnormal bacterial or fungal growth in your GI tract can cause diarrhea. Low levels of healthy microbiome microorganisms like Bifidobacter and Lactobacillus can cause diarrhea. Other nutrient deficiencies can cause diarrhea. Gluten exposure can cause diarrhea. So lots of things can, and that's why it's important. If you're struggling, you don't know why, it's important to work with somebody who understands the complexity of all those different things and can measure those to rule out which one is causing yours. What's my opinion on home food sensitivity tests? Most of them are highly, do I say highly enough? Highly inaccurate and misleading. Most of them are IgG. And IgG tests are extremely notorious for creating a false positive. So you actually become allergic, or your test results say that you're allergic to far more than what you're actually allergic to, leading you to a massive scale diet restriction that may not be necessary. And in that regard can create malnourishment because you limit your food to such a great degree. So I'm not a big fan of these home test kits. These are just, in my opinion, these are shark companies trying to take advantage of people to rule things out, and they don't understand the technology, or they wouldn't even offer it as a service without explaining the comprehensive nature of what they're offering. Let's see. Will the doctor know what B3 should be with a lymphocyte proliferation test? I don't know, Betty. That's a great question. Look, I'm one of less than 400 doctors in the world that actually have a diplomate with the American Clinical Board of Nutrition. What is that? That's a board certification. Just like, your internal medicine doctor is board certified, your GI doctor is board certified GI, your neurologist is board certified with the Board of Neurology. There aren't very many of us that are board certified in nutrition. It's not a, first of all, it's not an easy field to get into. In my opinion, it's one of the more challenging fields to get into because you have to understand biochemistry to a much higher level. But it's just not a field that most doctors want to pursue. It's not glamorous. I think it's super glamorous. I think it's really super glamorous. But again, you've got to love biochemistry, and I'm kind of a dork that way, or a geek that way. I live, breathe, and eat this stuff. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. Most doctors don't understand this stuff to any great degree. I mean, nutrition is just not taught in med school. I love this. Carol Lee, I'm a former patient of Dr. Hoffer, so I love that you are. Now, if you've been taking niacin for 30 years or more because of like something Dr. Hoffer was treating you for, like schizophrenia, and you've developed fatty liver, the question is that niacin what's created that fatty liver, or is there something else going on? I will make this point, Carol Lee, if you're being treated for a mental disorder using niacin, and it's probably something in the schizoaffective family of disorders, and you should understand that gluten is notorious. That one of the oldest known forms of gluten sensitivity is also known as bread madness. And that's because gluten can act as a psychoactive substance in the brain. And it actually, there are a number of great research studies that have linked gluten to causation, or to actually creating or causing schizophrenia. Now, gluten can also cause fatty liver disease. So you might be taking niacin in effect to kind of help a particular situation, but missing a bigger key point, which is if you haven't changed your diet, that could be also contributing to that liver issue. I'd recommend No Grain, No Pain. Read it and follow the diet for 30 days. Have your doctor measure and monitor your liver enzymes and see if you get improvement. So Tara's asking about what type or quantity of niacin do you recommend for LPA? LPA, that stands for lipoprotein little a, and that there is no, you can't lower lipoprotein A using niacin. Lipoprotein A is one of the few types of lipids or cholesterol markers. They cannot be manipulated, as far as we know, at least not yet, by diet. I've seen it come down a little bit with vitamin C, but you've got to go really, really high, and so like 10 grams a day to get any kind of reduction in lipoprotein A. And when you're doing that, the reduction has, in my experience anyway, hasn't been significant enough to justify using high doses of vitamin D indefinitely. Lipoprotein A is a relatively low-risk lipid as long as your other cardiovascular inflammatory markers are within normal range. So I'd really look at homocysteine, C-reactive protein, your triglyceride levels, your insulin, your A1C, all those as very important, your vitamin D and your other nutrients as markers to help you understand what your real cardiovascular inflammatory risks are. And so again, focusing on cholesterol, including lipoprotein A, in my opinion, it's the wrong thing to focus on. It's not that you can't be concerned about it, it's just that most people have overblown their fear and their concern about those cholesterol markers. If you are celiac, will you be exposed transdermally to gluten by working in an Italian restaurant which serves pizza and pasta? Possibly. Actually, interesting story, Karen. Had a patient one time who worked next door to a bakery, and this patient was celiac, and they were sharing the same air duct with the bakery next door. It was a strip mall. And anyway, he was breathing in wheat dust, and it was making him perpetually sick until we figured out, hey, the air ducts are shared, you're getting wheat dust. And once we got him relocated, he didn't have a problem anymore. So it's possible working in that pizzeria might give you enough cross-contamination. I'd say especially if you're working in the kitchen area, and if they're using, depends on how they make their dough in the pizzeria. So like a lot of them, they hand toss the wheat flour, and they hand toss it. So you got wheat particulate going up into the air, and in essence aerosolizing, which makes it easier for you to breathe it in. So I would be concerned. That would be one of the concerns I might have. Does tapioca or hemp cross-react with gluten? No, not to any great degree. Nothing that's been researched that shows that those are cross-reactive. Is niacin linked to Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease? It's linked indirectly, but not directly. So it's not niacin per se that causes Charcot-Marie-Tooth as much as Charcot-Marie-Tooth can increase your need for niacin. Let's keep going down. Go back up just a little bit right there. So Linda, is psoriasis an expression of slow or stagnant lymph movement? Not in my experience, Linda. Psoriasis is more of an expression of an immunoreactive illness where your immune system is producing antibodies that can damage the skin and lead to that psoriatic outcome. Psoriasis, if the diagnosis is accurate, psoriasis is autoimmune, and it's in that same family as psoriatic arthritis. So my experience, most cases of psoriasis I've ever seen were largely not linked to that, but more specifically they were linked to the wrong food, the wrong dietary components as a trigger for the autoimmune process. So dermatitis is it being used to describe a specific type of rash, or is it being used more generally in the context of deficiency and can have lots of different appearances? Exactly, bingo, that's exactly right. It's being used generically in the context of inflammation of the skin, but not specifically, biopsy diagnosed, this is pellagra, because that really doesn't even exist. Does niacin cause gout or numb feet? No, niacin does not cause gout. Uric acid crystal deposition in your joints causes gout. Niacin does not cause numb feet. Can you take a B vitamin complex daily, or is 3 times per week sufficient? It depends, Becky, on you as a person. Everybody's unique and different. It depends. So it depends on what your diet is. It depends on the level of alcohol that you drink. It depends on the level of processed foods or sugar or candy or sweets that you might consume as well. Remember, any carbohydrate that's high, excessive carbohydrates deplete B vitamins as a general rule of thumb. So if you're elevated carbohydrate intake, then you're more apt to become vitamin B deficient. If we're speculating. Let's see here. I love that. So Doc Shooter says, or Mike from Thousand Oaks, California, love watching your master classes. I've learned so much and started applying what you've taught with great or good success. I like hearing that. That positive feedback really feeds me. So thanks for sharing that. And if you're referring to our glutenology master class, maybe pop that link up. If those of you who haven't watched it, it's free. I made it available. It's 14 hours and based on 20 years of clinical experience and actual real doctoring. But it's not your local nutritionist who took a weekend course. My 22-year-old son's feet are red all the time, sitting, lying, standing. Could this be a niacin deficiency? It's worthwhile ruling it out, Christine. I would definitely, have the doc run the right tests to see if there's a niacin or a B vitamin deficit leading to that. But redness of the feet too, it could be other things. There is, generally a redness of the skin. It's like the skin is scalding or has a red-like appearance. There are a number of different things that can cause that. Certainly niacin is one of them, but there are others as well. Growing pains in kids. I tell you what I've seen with growing pains in kids more than anything else is gluten. Gluten is notorious. I've seen countless cases of children suffering horrific growing pains, and when we change their diet, the growing pains go away. So I would say gluten is probably, in my opinion, a much more likely culprit in that regard. With the IgG test, is it true that it can show positive for a sensitivity if you eat that food frequently, even if you're really not? Yes, it can. And the reason why, Nicole, is because IgG antibodies, when we make them, we have antibodies that we make that are friendly antibodies, meaning they're protective. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that we're reacting to the food. These are just protective antibodies. And most lab tests don't differentiate between protective antibodies and damaging antibodies. And this is one of the fundamental flaws in IgG testing and online testing is, again, these guys, in my opinion, many of these companies are vultures. They're out, you're spending your good money on a test that gives you results that are highly inaccurate. And, and you're out the money, but you don't have a solid result which you can rely on to do anything tangible or improve. Let's see, keep scrolling. Does B3 have anything to do with Raynaud's syndrome? Not so much. Raynaud's is an autoimmune condition, and so just like all other forms of autoimmunity, there are 4 primary triggers, right? There's microorganism triggers, there's nutritional deficit triggers, there's food triggers, and there's chemical triggers. And Raynaud's, one of the most common triggers I've seen, is protozoal parasites playing a role in that. Can alcohol be good for you? That's a great question, Timster. I don't know. I do know alcohol can be good for you under certain situations. I would say, when is alcohol good for you? When is alcohol good for you? Alcohol is good for you when the stress of your life is so great that it's doing more damage to your health than the relief that alcohol might provide temporarily. So that doesn't mean solve your problems with alcohol. I'm certainly not encouraging anyone to drink to solve their problems or to blunt their problems. But there are times and occasions where, just like with certain medications, that getting temporary relief to improve your quality of life in this very short-term window can be helpful, and sometimes more helpful. It's what we call hormesis. It's when you do something that damages the body, but at the same time helps the body, and that help outweighs the damage, right? And so that's a scenario where alcohol might be good for you. Again, very small window of opportunity increments, because beyond that, alcohol is a neurotoxin. It's a liver toxin. It depletes your vitamins and your minerals. It's a diuretic. It just isn't good as an overall drink to consume in large quantities. Again, I think large quantities, there's also a key word to focus in on. So that's what I was talking about. Somebody's asking about B3 megadosing for longevity and the length of telomeres. So telomeres are like the end caps to your DNA. And so your telomeres have a certain length, and we can actually measure the length of your telomeres, and that helps us to understand how long you're going to live, or at least predict how long you're going to live. And so we can increase your telomere length when we do healthy things, right? So when we sleep well, when we exercise, when we eat right, we can actually increase our telomere length. Well, there's some research going on right now about niacin, or vitamin B3, or forms of niacin, actually improving longevity and lifespan by increasing telomere length. Remember what I said earlier, showed you on the board that one of niacin's jobs, okay, as a general rule of thumb, is the preservation and the protection and the repair of your DNA. So if we're talking about telomeres, again, the end caps of your DNA. So I don't think it's a myth. I just think probably many supplement companies are overstating the efficacy of that by itself to solve your aging problem. Most people have, they're not aging gracefully, not because they need a special supplement to increase the length of their telomeres. They're not aging gracefully because they don't take good care of themselves, and they don't take an active role in their health. And so no pill's going to solve that. Let's see here. Is it true there are over 600 plant non-nutritive amino acids? No. There's arguably 20 to 22 amino acids in total. So I don't know where you heard 600 amino acids from, but no, not when we're talking about human physiology. There's some would say 22, some would say 20, depending on who you ask, but that's about it for amino acids. Let's see here. Scroll down on the left for me. We're going to wrap it up here because I think we're just about out of time. We're laughing about the alcohol. I love that. You should be laughing because, we all do it from time to take the edge off. Okay, I grew up with growing pails. That's what they call it. Wish I would have known that when it was grains. I'm not sure I understand what your comment there is, Deb. Can I use working in the garden 3 acres of food for my exercise? Yes and no. It depends on how aggressive that exercise is. So if you're out in the garden, if you're growing a massive garden, several acres, and you're out there weeding every day for several hours and working and walking, I like to look at exercises, the accumulation of about 5 miles of movement in the course of your day, but then also something that challenges your muscles. But it doesn't have to be 90 minutes in a gym. If you're doing farmer carries where you're carrying bales of water, or not bales, but pails of water, or you're carrying, we do this with our animals on the farm, we carry buckets of feed and things of that nature to them. So, you're doing some physical labor. It just depends on the level of physical labor that you're actually doing. Some people overstate their physical labor because they're out of shape. But the more you do, the more in shape you get. So then, again, with exercise, it becomes find new ways to challenge your coordination and find new ways to challenge yourself with exercise. Otherwise, what happens is your body adjusts to what you do every day, and then your benefit starts to diminish. Have I done a class on cross-reactive foods? Yes, Sue, I have. And again, that's the link. We put it up in the feed to my master class. So I had an entire episode on cross-reactive foods and foods that mimic gluten or gluten mimicry. Okay, we got to wrap this up. Last question, is psyllium husk okay to eat? Sure. Psyllium husk is a good source of fiber. Just make sure it's organic, Randall. But as a fiber, yeah, it's a good source. But you know, is real food a better source than a supplemental psyllium? It is. So try to get your fiber through real food. I would say just prioritize real food, and if it's still, you find yourself falling short of fiber, psyllium husk organically is a great way. We actually have something called ultra fiber, which has psyllium husk in it and other things in it as well. All right, folks, we're 15 minutes past the hour, so a little bit past due here. Thanks for spending Monday evening with me. I hope you learned something. Look, if I haven't, I've done my job if you've learned something, and I haven't if you haven't. So I hope you come here every Monday and learn something new. If you want to keep learning and you want to keep coming back, maybe you're new to the show, do me a favor. Go visit me at glutenfreesociety.org. Glutenfreesociety.org. There's just a little tab in the halfway down the page, it says sign up for the world's #1 gluten-free newsletter. If you want to learn more about what we do with diet, and you want to learn more about education around nutrition, and you want to get notified every time we do a live show with a live Q&A, sign up for our list. It's the only way we can guarantee that you won't be censored. If you subscribe to our YouTube channel or our Facebook group, look, they control and they manipulate my channel all the time. They don't show what we publish most of the time to most of the people who have asked us, who have asked for that information. So the best way to get the information from me without it being censored is to go to glutenfreesociety.org and make sure you're on my newsletter, because that's the least censored mechanism by which I can deliver information consistently to you. So, hey, if you know somebody that could benefit from tonight's lesson, from tonight's show, hey, do me a favor. Remember, save 100 million lives is what we're about, and I can't save 100 million if we have a limited audience is stingy with the information. So share it, right? Share it and hashtag save 100 million lives. You hashtag that for me. That way we can find it and know just how far our reach is spreading in the world. So again, thanks for spending Monday night with me. We'll see you next Monday for another episode of Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. Have a great week. Hey, if you've got a functional medicine or health question that you'd like me to answer for you, make sure you send me an email, glutenology@gmail.com, and we'll do our best to create a video answer just for you. Have a great day.